After I spoke about the shot making of players like Tony Parker, CJ McCollum, Steph Curry, and others, in relation to doing normal pregame layup drill versus the types of shots that they're shooting in games, the question was asked, well, how do you practice these types of shots the players, such as Curry, are making during games? To me, I think back to when I was in college. I didn't play college basketball, but I played a lot of pickup basketball at the Wooden Center. And I was always adept at shooting floaters. But then when I went to coach, because I coached youth teams pretty much all through college, and when I would go and try to demonstrate a floater to the young players that I was working with, I almost never made the shot. For some reason, during games, I'd inevitably make the shot. A post player would rotate towards me, or a bigger guy would rotate towards me on a drive, and I could put the ball up and put it over and really frustrate defensive players because I could hit the shot. But then when I tried to demonstrate it to youth players, inevitably I'd airball the shot or throw it over the basket, or generally my shots weren't that close. And so one of the things is, my shot in the game was based on the task constraints. So specifically, the defensive player, the height of the defensive player, maybe the length of the defensive player, the speed with which that player was moving towards me, and then also the angle of my drive would dictate how I would have to shoot that shot. Whereas when I was demonstrating by myself against nobody, no defensive players, and just trying to shoot the shot, it always felt less natural. I always felt tight shooting that type of shot when I was demonstrating it for players. And part of that was the task constraints weren't there. Why would I shoot this floater and make it a harder shot when there's not a defensive player in front of me? And so I think that's one of the things to keep in mind when we're trying to teach shot making to children, is the shots in a lot of ways are going to be determined by the defense that's present in a given situation. And then also will be based on an individual's constraints. So how big or strong is the player, how fast is the player, how quick is the player, etc. These things are going to determine what type of shots the player needs to be able to make in game situations versus defensive players. And then in the moment, the defense is going to dictate what type of shot is going to be most appropriate. And so trying to practice these in on-air situations is often difficult because the shot changes with the defense, both from a decision-making aspect, deciding which shot to take, and also an execution aspect, kind of as I mentioned with my attempts at the floaters versus nobody versus defensive players in the game. So when I'm practicing these shots with young players, as much as possible, once I get past the beginner stage with the player where we're just trying to work on footwork and picking up the basketball and putting the ball on the backboard. So to me, the basic coordination of shooting a layup. When we're getting towards the skill of shooting a layup, it's going to incorporate that decision-making aspect, and it's going to necessitate the shooting of different types of shots. So the easiest way to practice this typically is, a lot of players of my generation, we develop these kind of shots by playing one-on-one and also playing 21. So a couple weeks ago, I also was asked, do you think 21 has value for young players? And I said yes, but I also think it can develop bad habits. So to me, if I was going to play 21 with young players, I would put some task constraints on it. So I would make one player, come out to defend. So to me, a perfect game of 21, so if you're unfamiliar, 21, play different ways at different areas, but essentially it's one on everybody. You score, you go to the free throw line. Some people allow you to make as many free throws in a row as you want. Some, we used to limit it to 3 free throws. If you made 3 in a row, then you get the ball again. It's your ball. Change of possession. If you miss a shot, then whoever gets the rebound plays offense next. So to me, a perfect game of 21 would be 3 players. Then you could change up the task constraints. So maybe you force one player to always be guarding the ball, as opposed to people just kind of sitting back and not really playing defense. And then keep one player who cannot leave the key. So one idea I came up with was on defense, there always has to be one player outside the key and one player inside the key. So that way, if as an offensive player, if I beat the first player and I get myself in the key, I'm not double teamed. Now I can concentrate, as in a game situation, well, where's the next defensive player rotating from? And so to me, putting these kind of task constraints on a game of 21 can create great opportunities for players both to work on their individual moves and also to work on finishing against defensive players in different situations. So that one-on-one, those are two easy examples of games that players can play either on their own or in a practice to focus that will create a lot of shot-making opportunities. I also use basic drills in practice where, again, I manipulate the task constraint to force players to kind of shoot the shots that I want them to practice. So I may want them to work on a post player rotating over. So I'm going to devise some drill where they're penetrating to the basket and a player is going to rotate. So we used to do one, pass the ball, defense starts under the basket, passes it out to the offensive player at the top of the key. Offensive player is going to drive, and the defensive player has to shuffle out, touch a cone, and then rotate over like a help defensive player rotating in front. Other drills I use are chaser type drills where the offense starts with an advantage and the defensive player is behind the offensive player chasing to catch up. So it's just putting defense in different situations and giving the offense different types of advantages that are going to force the offensive player to shoot different shots, either because the angle is different, the speed is different, or the actual shot is going to be different. So a player is going to have to use a reverse layup or a floater or some different type of finish as opposed to just using, a hand behind the ball, outside hand, inside foot layup. So again, you can change the intensity, you can change the angle, you can change the type of shot, you can change the, how the defense is playing. All these are different ways to manipulate task constraints that enable players or force players to move beyond the most practiced skill execution, which is the outside hand, inside foot layup, and forces the offense to practice in a different way. And this to me is the beginning of trying to create shot makers as opposed to somebody who's just kind of restricted to one type of layup. And when players struggle or when I see a lack of creativity or, players who kind of struggle to go beyond what they've spent most of their time practicing, that's when I might simplify a layup and demonstrate different types of shots, either through verbal explanations and questions, which I've done, or through actually doing a layup and demonstrating different types and having them practice a couple times with these different types of shots. So again, another method that I've used in clinics especially is, I have a line of players and we're doing a layup drill and, nobody in line can do the same shot as anybody else in line. So if you're first in line, any shot is possible. If you're sixth or seventh in line, maybe they've taken away an outside hand, inside foot layup, maybe an outside hand, outside foot layup, inside hand, outside foot layup, a float or reverse layup. So now you have to come up with what's your seventh or eighth or ninth option that you're going to go to in this situation. Is it going to be an up and under? Is it going to be a rondo? Is it going to be a rondo step through? Is it going to be a spin layup? There's still, I think when we asked the question at a clinic that I did last year, we came up with 12 or 13 different types of finishes that a player could do just starting on one side of the basket, and that was just, in 2 or 3 minutes we came up with 12 or 13 different options. And if we thought about it, we could probably come up with more, depending on how specific you want to get to, differentiating different types of shots. So point is there's lots of ways that you can finish around the basket, lots of different strategies that a coach can use to create opportunities for players to shoot different types of shots and move beyond just the standard pregame layup drill of 3/4 speed, perfect angle, outside foot, or inside hand layup. So these different task constraints, manipulating these constraints, asking questions, putting players in different situations, allowing them to play one-on-one, 21 games of this nature. These really help players to develop shot-making skills and to move beyond the most practiced shots.